I once heard a quotation that took me years to understand. And that's the longest journey we take each day is the 18 inches or 45 centimeters that separates our heart from our mind. When I first heard that, I didn't know what it meant, and I dismissed it. And I figured I'm never going to pay any attention to it because I'm never going to quite understand. But when I think again, it helps me to recognize how important it is that I continue to learn from my mistakes. That distance became real the day that I made an incredible career blunder and almost ruined my reputation. That day was the worst day of my career. But when I think again, it was the best day of my career. I didn't know it then, but I recognize that I learned more in my failures than I did in any of my successes. To bring this into context, I was 12 years into what was a wonderful career ascent. And every day I came to work recognizing that I was going to grow. But something happened on one fateful day that was a growth beyond anything I ever imagined. On that particular day, I had a mission to be able to give my CEO important financial information that he needed, that he was going to use to acquire a company. I got everything I needed to do, except there was one thing I didn't count on. I needed an individual named John in my company to assist me in helping me to create the report that I was going to get to the CEO. It was critical that on a particular day for that acquisition, because there was another company interested in buying the same company that my CEO wanted to buy, time was of the essence. It was critical that by noon on that fateful day that I was going to deliver the report with everything he needed in order to make that transaction happen. Just so happens there was a colleague of mine named John who was assigned to help me, who was in a different department. I called John at 8 o'clock that morning and I asked him, John, do you have the information that is necessary for us to deliver to the CEO? And he said, yes, I do. Since time was ticking away, I said, here's what we're going to do. Please meet me with that report at 11:45. That will give me 15 minutes to be able to open up the report, validate what was in there, and there was one particular number that was critical on the report that John needed to include. No problem. I was thrilled to death. This was the path to promotion. This was the path to my bonus. Everything was lined up. Since John and I agreed that we were going to meet at 11:45, sure enough, he showed up. But something was in my mind, in my heart, that I couldn't quite understand, but I dismissed it. John handed me the report. I opened it up. There was one number that I was looking for in this 3-page report. And when I opened it and I started to read it, I immediately went to page 3. And it wasn't there. It's like, okay. I went up to page 1. Let me find it there. So I started to read page 1. I didn't find it. Where is it? Maybe it's on page 2. I'm going to page 2. It's not on page 2. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm just not getting this right. Let me go back to page 3. It's not there. Now, John was standing right there. But something was happening inside of me I could not understand. In my mind, I knew that everything was okay. But I have to interject, I didn't like John. Every interaction I had with him before, He rubbed me the wrong way. There was something about his bad attitude that I just didn't understand, and I couldn't shake it. But as John and I were sitting there and I was reviewing the report, my mind was clear. All evidence was we have what we need to give to my CEO. But my heart was beating like a drum. I could not reconcile what was happening between my mind that thought everything was good and my heart that had an intuition that everything is bad. As I continued through the report, I now turned to John. John, where is the merger data that we need to give to the CEO? And his response, oh, was I supposed to include that in the report? Yes, John, we spoke about it at 8 o'clock this morning. We've been working on it for 2 months. And what happened in the next few seconds was something I never could have expected. I looked at John, and in a moment I can't quite explain, I exploded like a bomb. I let loose a tirade. Even though we were in Midtown Manhattan, if the Statue of Liberty had ears, she would have heard my scream. I yelled at him. I screamed at him. I took my finger and I put it into his face. And I couldn't believe, John, this is everything we agreed on. The clock is ticking. We have 4 minutes left before this transaction happens, and it's not here. This was me continuing in my tirade, letting loose on John. There were 100 employees on the floor who were looking at me wondering what just happened. I was in an uncontrollable rage. It took me 12 years to climb an incredible ascent, and I was about to destroy it in 5 seconds. I didn't know what was happening. And after I got through with John, and after I realized we blew the deal, I was embarrassed and ashamed. I had never done something so terrible. I was accountable for the deal, not John, but what happened is I let the way I feel about John get in the way, and John did not deserve my wrath. Even though I was incredibly upset with him, I was accountable for the deal. Everyone was looking at me as, what the heck happened to this guy? He is a leader that we look up to, and this is what happened? I was about to jeopardize everything I did for the guy who could not handle the pressure. As the event occurred and everything went haywire, all because of the way that I behaved despite John's neglect, I took a deep breath. I said, I don't know what to do with this. What I knew, I could not stay in the office after what I've done. I need to get out of here. I don't know where I'm going to go, but I know where I cannot be, and that's right here. I needed to get out of the building. In fact, I was so afraid that they were going to fire me. I needed to get out of it for no reason. If they're going to fire me, they got to tell me to my face. And if I disappear, they can't find me. They can't fire me. What a great strategy. So I went to the elevator. I went down the building. I walked out onto the street of Manhattan, and I did the only thing that I could think of. I walked 2 blocks to a Barnes & Noble bookstore. I walked into the bookstore, I looked at the clerk, and I said, I'm looking for a book. And he said in a very New York style, yeah, you and what army? Okay. So he says to me, what book are you looking for? And I said, I don't know. Okay. Who's the author? I don't know. What's the book about? I don't know. and he snaps back, he's had enough of me in an incredibly annoying manner, then I don't know how to help you. I stammered on my words, I stumbled and bumbled, so I asked him the question, John, could you tell me where I could find, or do you have a book on human behavior? And he snaps back, yeah, about 800. Do you have anyone in mind? Could you just tell me where I can find a book on human behavior? He didn't even talk to me anymore. He just pointed. So I said, okay. What I knew then, this was me. All rational thought, all intelligence, everything that I could think of, put together a sentence I couldn't even explain, here I was. So I said, okay. He pointed in that direction. And what I had to do, from that point, I started walking the aisles of the bookstore. I was walking, hoping, thinking that some divine intervention was going to happen, where the book that I had no idea, I didn't know the title, I didn't know the author, I didn't even know what it was about. So I walked from aisle to aisle, thinking somewhere somebody is going to drop a book right into my head that is going to happen into my hands, and I am going to feel better. All of a sudden, in the corner of my eye, I see this book, and it had 2 words that caught my eye. The first word was emotional. Great, because I am feeling really emotional. That must be for me. But the second title said intelligent. I said, there's no way that's for me, because I am feeling anything but intelligent. But maybe there's something here. So I picked up the book and I started reading the back cover. And I started to learn about myself. And it explained to me what happened in my episode with John. And it said that I was a victim of what's called emotional hijacking. I'd never heard of that. I'd never even heard of emotional intelligence. Emotional hijacking, it explained. And it went on to say what the social psychologists call the fight, freeze, or flight response. Oh my God, I struck gold. That's exactly what happened to me. This is the book. Too ashamed to even go back to the office for fear I was going to get fired, I wasn't even worried about tomorrow. Tomorrow will take care of itself, but right now, I got to figure out today. I sat in the bookstore for the remainder of the day, and I read the whole book. And I sat there in awe, because the subtitle of emotional intelligence is why it can matter more than IQ. Why it can matter more than IQ. My entire education was built upon the importance of intellect, and it significantly underestimated and ignored anything having to do with temperament. This was the gap in my formal education, explaining to me that the massive reputational blunder that I just committed, finally somebody got me. I'd never done anything of that severity, but now I'm gaining insight into myself that I'd never had before. And what I want to explain here, and what I hope I can leave you with, I walked into a danger zone unexpectedly, and I didn't have a clue how to operate under that pressure. Because when you're under pressure, if you're not conditioned to it, the pressure overrides any clarity of mind. The great expectations, they just push everything that you're thinking away from you. And as I began to read, and it started to teach me the techniques of what you can do when you are in the fight, freeze, or flight response, I want everyone to follow me if you could. I'm going to put the clicker down for just a second, and I want you to please show me your hands. As I move my hands, I'm going to ask you all to just take a deep breath and then follow my hands right into the prayer position. Now, you could go to the steeple position or modified steeple, but right now I am in a very peaceful place. That sure beats the heck out of the fight or flight response. What emotional intelligence taught me, and what I wish I had learned in my preparation for my career in finance, that when you recognize the emotional and the danger zones, stop for just a second. In that space between the time that I asked John a question and I hit him over the head with a sledgehammer, what I should have done is stop talking and start counting. 1, 2, 3. Breathe. Get the lungs back into power of the oxygen, back into my lungs so I could reestablish the strength. And I've got a very strong message here. In addition to the techniques, and I hope I can inspire you to learn about this incredible social science of emotional intelligence, I started to read everything I possibly could on this subject. I even wrote a book about it called The Moment That Defines Your Life, which combines the social science of emotional intelligence with the ancient philosophy of Stoicism. I read a book by Marcus Aurelius called Meditations after this episode, and I have been a lifelong emotional intelligence Stoic philosophy learner from there. But my point is this. And when I think about how I started this presentation, I did not have a clue how to manage the space between my heart and my mind. I did not know what happened when they don't reconcile. And how do you gain greater self-awareness and better understand the world around you without learning something so important? So I ask you and I encourage you. First, think about how do you handle the pressure under the weight of great expectations? And think about the journeys that you take. I'm good with pressure now. I can handle just about anything. But when I think about what is the longest journey that I take, it is not when I cross continents. I've crossed 100,000 stages. It is not when I cross a stage. The longest journey I take is the 18 inches that separates my heart from my mind. Because if you can get in tune with what the heart is saying, and you can align it and recognize what are the opportunities for growth when you understand what to do with one and the other? I don't know if any of you are going to face the embarrassing moment that I had, but when I think about the beginning when I said it was the worst day in my career, I hope that whenever you face that danger zone, you don't need to walk to a Barnes & Noble bookstore to discover yourself. Just think about the distance between the heart and the mind. Take a deep breath and recognize that you are getting in touch with yourself and the world around you. And when you do, and you consider that event, at the time you may think it is the worst day of your career, perhaps you can think again, and maybe it will be the best day of your career. Thank you all for your time and your attention.